Hello, and welcome back to the Pure Nintendo podcast. This is your weekly dose of all things Nintendo. My name is Gemma. Almost forgot my name there for a sec. And joining me this week, I have my good friend Kirk. Welcome back, Kirk.
Hey, glad to be here. And we got our names all sorted. We know
Yeah,
who we are. We're ready to go.
every week there's a little stressful part of me that is like, just worried about getting your name wrong for some reason. I don't know why. It's
Well,
possible I could call you Trev by mistake, and I don't know.
that's true. Well,
It's
and
fine.
I'm sure you do it with your kids. I'm always getting their names wrong.
Oh
Um,
yeah, totally.
yeah,
Exactly.
my dad did it with us. You have more than one kid, and they all just kind of blend together.
Yeah, especially when you're frustrated and you're in that moment of just,
Oh,
ah, yeah,
yeah. Nothing worse than trying to make a point with your children and using the wrong name. Like, what did I do?
exactly.
Like, you know what I meant.
Yeah. And not that I'm frustrated about the podcast at all. I love doing this, of course, but slightly stressful, but that's okay. We've got some interesting news to talk about this week. We've got quite a few games that we're playing to go through, and another interesting Switch 2 rumor of the week that we'll get to later. So, first of all, I guess today for you is actually, and this is not really Nintendo related, but it's May the 4th, right? So, May the 4th be with you.
Oh, yeah.
Star Wars
Yeah.
Day. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Did you celebrate
yeah.
by playing Star Wars today or anything, or watching
No,
Star Wars
no,
today?
I think have we discussed on the show or just off the show that I'm really just not a Star Wars guy
Hmm.
anymore.
Hmm.
Haven't been
Yes.
since I'd say about 20 minutes through the third movie in 1983.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, I lost interest about the time well, no, never mind. we'll
Okay.
we'll save that for a Star Wars themed show.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Good to know. Well, let's start off with some news that I just found yesterday, which was the ESRB rating for a game called Nintendo World Championships NES Edition. And I don't know if you saw this news also, but I don't know how it comes about that sometimes we hear, "Oh, this received a classification in America." But the game hasn't been announced. No one's been talking about this. Nintendo hasn't mentioned a game called Nintendo World Championships NES Edition. How does that happen that we get to hear it from the classification board before we hear from Nintendo? Is that on purpose, or how does that work? I don't know. But
I'm a
yeah, no,
because
no,
that
you're
happens a lot, right?
yeah, yeah. Does
I'm
Nintendo care?
guessing, yeah, they need to get the rating before they start promoting it. Usually, maybe it's better
Mm,
than saying rating pending, so they have to file
mm,
with them, and people know that, so they're going to check it, and the ratings board probably just releases the information when it's available. They have no interest in embargoes,
yeah, yeah,
so yeah,
yeah,
people see it rated there, and they assume they know what they're getting.
yeah. I guess so. Anyway, this one got an E for everyone rating, so it's you know, a nice family-friendly title, I guess, that anyone can play. But it sounds like I think the description was something like um, there would be several challenges, I think it was 2D challenges and platformer games in which players traverse through various modes, e.g., speedrun and survival. So it sounds, and this is what's people are talking about on the interwebs. It sounds a bit like an NES remix title from a few years ago. Were they on the Wii? Can't remember where they were now. Were they Wii games?
They
NES remix?
were they? I thought it was Nintendo Switch Online stuff.
Was it? Oh gosh, it seems like so long ago, but maybe it was. Anyway, do you remember them, right? Did you play those?
I did a couple. They were mostly of games that were before my time, so I didn't have the nostalgia
Hmm.
factor. I shouldn't say before my time. I was ahead of that time. But
Right.
before I owned a Nintendo. Well,
Yeah, fair enough. Yes. So it's for the Wii U actually, so we were both wrong.
okay. Well, there you go.
It's it's that little gray period between the Wii and the Switch, which was known as the Wii U. And it was 2014. Um, was the NES, oh sorry, 13 and 14. There were two, NES Remix and NES Remix 2. They were really fun little games or collections, I suppose, of NES games, obviously, Nintendo Entertainment System games from the 80s slash early 90s, done in different interesting ways. And so I really hope that's what this World Championship business is, without hearing directly from Nintendo themselves. We can only guess, but it sounds, Nintendo World Championships. It sounds like it's a competition of sorts. I think from the other piece of information that came from this rating announcement was there's some kind of microtransaction. So it sounds like it might even be a free to play title that you can purchase something or other, whether it's levels or characters or I don't know. But that's the impression I got from that piece of news. Are you interested in such a thing? Maybe not because it's NES and you're not, and it's before your time.
um, that I'd have to see it. I mean, I like it whenever they take these old games and do something with them like this, as opposed
Hmm.
to just kind of putting them out there again.
Mm.
Well, depending on the game, there are some that I love in their original version so much that I can continue to play them forever. Like Xevious, for example. Anytime
Mm.
Xevious is released for a system, I'll buy it. But so yeah, I'd have to see what all it entails and how it comes together.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully we hear something soon. When are we due for another kind of newsy, directy type of thing from Nintendo? Do we know?
I think traditionally there's been one in June, but that's the one where they've said that they expect they're finally going to announce the Switch successor.
Mm.
So, I
Hmm.
mean, I guess this could be thrown in because they can't spend the whole direct talking about the Switch successor because they won't. They're just going to say, "Hey, look, here's your quick look. This is
Yeah.
when it's going to be available," and then everyone gets to go crazy and speculate for a long time as they slowly release the info. So this could help pad it out.
Do you think the Switch 2 would be at the end of a direct? You know how at the end of the direct we tend to get a tease for something big, right? In terms of a game usually, but do you think they would do a bunch of games like this, like whatever else they've got in the pipeline that we don't know of, and then at the end, oh hey, we've got one more thing to tell you. Switch 2.
I bet. You know what would be really cool is if they don't actually show anything about the system itself, but they show a game, and
Mhm.
then at the end of the trailer it says coming for, and then whatever the Switch is called, and then just leave it.
Mm. That would be cool.
Yeah.
That would be cool. Yeah, I like that. That'd be good. Speaking of world championships, and this is not on my list, I'm going off script a little bit here. But there was the Mario Kart World Championships. I don't know if that's actually what it's officially called, but Nintendo of America at least posted on YouTube this hour-long video of the world, like the best of the best, competing from all over the world. I think there were six, one from like Japan. There was an Australian, New Zealand representative. America had one. Europe, Hong Kong. I think there was yeah, six of them competing for the title of best Mario Kart player in the world, which was super fun to watch actually, and see these guys competing. Did you hear about that by any chance?
No.
No, it was full on. Like you're watching these guys and you're just going, "Wow, they're really good," and I would not be able to compete with them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
see, if I were to watch that, I don't know that I would notice that they were really good. Like I play that game and I like it, but what
Mm.
separates the fantastic players from the people who are just having fun would probably be lost on, or maybe not. Maybe what they're doing is so incredible. Maybe wait a minute, I didn't even know that was possible.
True. Well, there were a lot of shortcuts that I didn't know about. I'm like, "Oh, I need to try that." They
Oh,
do look
sure,
very serious though, and I was saying to my family because we watched it together, it almost takes the fun out of Mario Kart a little bit. Like if one of these people was playing at home with their friends or family, would the family want to play with them? Because they're just, you know, they're too good, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. We I'm sure you did. We had that. My older brother was the one in games that we played who was smarter than us. They weren't actually they were video games too. Um,
Mhm.
and he was like we would play Sea Battle on the Intellivision, and he beat me every time. He was just so much better at military strategy than I was in the Sea Battle game. And one time I finally beat him in dramatic fashion and never played him again. I wanted to go out on top, so I just quit playing the game. It would be the
Yeah.
same with me with Mario Kart. If I were playing him, I
Yeah.
would finally beat him once, and then I would just say, "No, I'm done."
Trev would say there is a Simpsons reference to that when Homer was playing Bart in a boxing game, and Homer never beat Bart, not ever. And then, yeah, there was one moment where he was about to win, and
Yeah,
the TV cut out for some reason. And so
I,
Bart said, "I quit at this point. I'm the champion
yeah,
forever."
good for Bart. And you know what? Trev would be proud of me because I've seen that episode,
Yeah,
and I
right.
will always remember the "no" that Homer yelled when it went off when he was so close to victory.
Yeah.
That exasperation stuck with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, exactly. We can all relate to that.
Yes.
Very cool. The other piece of interesting news that I found out, or I was reading about during the week, was that we're going to talk about this a lot, I think, over the next little while, just on and off as we get more tidbits. And this is another Zelda movie update from director Wes Ball. And I'll read the quote because it's just a really good it's a really good quote from him that I think gives fans hopefully a bit of, I don't know, encouragement that he's the right person for the job. Anyway, so what he says is we're working on it. I think it's going to be great. Fans are going to be happy. Legend of Zelda to me is one of the most important things ever in my life. Next to Star Wars. So not quite as important as yours.
Yeah, he's lost me.
Yeah. I've played Legend of Zelda throughout my childhood into my adulthood. You know what I mean? I'm a fan. I'm a fellow fan. I will go to the ends of the earth to make sure that it is the movie we all hope it will be, which I love. I love that. You know, he could just be saying it, of course, but it sounds like he's passionate. Sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Sounds like he's the right person for the job.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
Well,
don't
I
want
can
someone coming
imagine
in.
too.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can imagine that Nintendo, when they're deciding, okay, we're going to produce this movie and it's going to be made, and they're
Hmm.
looking for a director, I can't imagine they would have gone with somebody who hasn't played the Zelda games and understands the
Yeah.
material. Now, I could be wrong. You're going to get whoever you think the best director is going to be. You got to put the
Hmm.
whole team together. So I don't even think it's necessary for him to have played Zelda to make an
Hmm.
excellent Zelda movie. But
True.
if he's on the short list and he goes into Nintendo and is, telling them his favorite moments from Twilight Princess, then,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm sure that helped them make the decision.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. That enthusiasm. You obviously have to be a good director as well. You have to know what you're doing behind the camera, but having that enthusiasm and that fandom or whatever you want to call it, definitely would help. And I think it sounds like Nintendo's made a good choice. There are no details at this point. I think, Wes Ball, the director, is currently promoting his current movie, which is, what is it? One of the Planet of the Apes
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, one of the entries, which I think is out now. I'm not sure it's out soon, if not now. And people, of course, keep asking him about Zelda. So he expects that. And he keeps saying things like, I can't really talk about it, at this point, which is fine. We don't expect that. But just to hear him say that, at least give people hope, make people feel kind of okay with
Yeah.
this. Because some fans are worried, I guess, right? Like it could go either way, you know.
Yeah.
But the other,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think a lot of people get a little too close to the material of the things that
Hmm.
they're into, and or get protective of it. I don't like that. I don't think that makes sense. I think anytime you make an entry in something, then it's up to the people making it however they want to do it, and that doesn't mean they're going to be successful. They can
Hmm.
certainly make missteps, but it's not. You can't take that personally as a fan or get angry about it.
Mm.
Just go back to the one that you love and hope that the
Yeah.
next one's
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking also, with the Mario movie, for example, Nintendo kind of surprised us by telling us about that quite close to the end of, its production life cycle. And then it
Hmm.
was on us 6 months later. This one, they've given us a lot more notice. And it feels a little bit like that's what they do with Zelda games, actually, when you think about it. There's years between games. We seem to hear about them, and then we wait and we wait for an update, a bit like Metroid. And
Yeah.
then, yeah. So it's not unlike waiting for a new Zelda title, like game title, I think, in terms of if what people worry about waiting till we don't have a date, but it's probably at least 2026 or maybe 27. I don't know. It depends on the filming and script and all the rest of it. But it's not, it lines up with what we expect for Legend of Zelda game titles, I think. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes sense. And I also think that because it's a live action movie where they are going to have to hire actors and they're going to build some sets, I mean, it's going to have a lot longer production or life
Mm,
than an animated movie would. So,
mhm.
like,
True.
inherently, it's just going to take longer to make this film. There's a lot more they
Yeah.
have to go into than just sitting in a studio and
Yeah.
um, coding.
Yes. Yeah,
I've
exactly.
oversimplified the process of
Yeah.
making an animated movie quite a bit. I know, don't get mad, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be a bigger production.
Yes, definitely. And like the games, I'd rather they took their time and made something, great, than rushed it and compromised, I suppose, on the quality a little. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
And you know what just occurred to me that I hadn't thought of before, and I hope doesn't
Mm-hmm.
happen is, there's been some speculation. We've talked about it. Is what it's going to be about? Will it be how's it going to tie in with the
Mm-hmm.
Zelda canon? Is it a new story? Is it going to be the retelling of a video game, from the past?
Mm-hmm.
I think what I'm afraid of right now is that I'm hoping it's a new story that makes allusions to the other video games that we could find and say, oh, I recognize this. Oh, look, there's Midna, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but what I hope they don't do is make a new story and then after it give us the video game version of the movie. I don't
Mm,
want a Zelda game where I already know what
true.
happens or where we're going. Like the whole thing, especially with the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, is it was the exploration that was so great and branching out and opening up new areas of the map. That was my favorite part. In fact, usually, well, Breath of the Wild I finished. Tears of the Kingdom I didn't. But once I got through the whole map and everything was open,
Mhm.
that's when I start to lose interest. Even though there's so much more
Mm,
to do, I
yeah,
miss
yeah.
you know that feeling of exhilaration when you shoot up in the air and you're able to
Yeah, yeah.
see more things and get to more places and write more into the map. So
Yes.
I don't want a video game to follow something that I've already seen in a movie. So I hope they don't go down that route.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it could very well do that. I mean, in some ways, it would make sense from a financial point of view, I suppose. If the movie is successful, a game that follows it would probably be successful. But yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think it's a good move either. Unless it's a different, a quick, maybe even a top down. I don't know if that would work either. It'd have to be a separate to the series that we know and love. Like they'd still have to be working on another completely new Zelda title, and if they wanted to do some quick and dirty Zelda movie spin-off thing, they could, but I don't think they would waste their time
yeah.
on that. Yeah, I think so. Speaking of Tears of the Kingdom, though, we're coming up to the anniversary of that game. It was May the 12th, I think, wasn't it? Which is this week or next week. So I don't know.
Uh,
Yeah, next week we might do a retrospective. Maybe we'll see how we go.
yeah,
But yeah,
maybe
one whole
I'll load it back up to see if I could remember where I was or how much time I put
year.
into it before I
Yeah.
stopped. Yeah,
Yeah, same, exactly. Yeah, so one whole year. So that's the update on the Zelda movie. Um, you know, it's sort of divided fans a little bit, but let us know, listeners, if you have an opinion on the movie and what you think. Hopefully, I mean, I'm optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm pretty positive person generally anyway, and new content is always good. And it was inevitable, I think, that they would do a movie. I was surprised it was live action, but you know, I'll definitely see it regardless. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm very
yeah.
excited.
I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to it. I mean, I love Zelda, and I'm a fan of that type of movie. These big
Hmm.
fantasy epics are my thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. Definitely
and I
looking
want to
forward to it.
see what a lot of these enemies look like when
Mm.
they need to make them look more realistic. I mean, it's all going to have to fit into this real world that they're building. So
Hmm.
it'll be really fun to see what some of these end up looking like under that scope.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Definitely keen to see a bokoblin
Yeah,
in real life or whatever. It's CGI, but you know, a realistic version could be very cool. Awesome. Any other news before we move on to the games that we're playing this week?
well, I don't know.
You have
I
no?
don't think I have anything worth
That's cool.
conversing over.
Yeah. Well, we have a long list of games we're playing. Looks like we've been busy this week. And first of all, I wanted to start with one that just came out, which is, I guess, a relatively big title for Nintendo. It's Endless Ocean Luminous, which is, I think, the third in the series, if I'm not mistaken. And I haven't played either in the series previously. Wasn't particularly interested. I'm reviewing this one, which is awesome. This one, to be honest, for whatever reason, the trailer actually grabbed me. Maybe I don't know why. It's never grabbed me before, but this one did. And my kids and I were watching the trailer, a couple of weeks ago. Excuse me, and it just looks kind of fun to collect sea life, I suppose, right? I've only had a short time with it so far. Actually, just before the show, I booted it up. I dived. excuse the pun. I dived right in, and what I
Well
what
done.
I yeah. But what I do love is that you literally do dive right in. It's very quick to get into. There's not much messing around. There's a quick tutorial, and then you're straight into it. There's 3 modes. There's the diving with, 1,000,000 people, whatever it's called. 40 is it 40 people? I haven't tried that one yet, but there's the mode where you're diving with online players. I think it was something ridiculous like 40 people, wasn't it, from the trailer? And then there's a solo dive where you just dive by yourself. And then there's a story mode. And I went into the solo dive to start with, and it's a really, really relaxing game. I love the music. I love the look of it. It looks beautiful. It actually looks really, really nice. I don't know how long it takes to capture all of these creatures and put them into this game, but it just looks lovely. It's very blue. Obviously, you're in the ocean, and there's at least initially the dive site that I was doing, and my kids and I were playing it together. We sort of swapped the control and did some exploring or exploration, and there's just plenty to see, plenty of sea creatures to capture. And in fact, it's over 500. Oh gosh, now I've forgotten the number. It's like 538, something like that. And you've got this log. There's something quite fulfilling about just filling up question marks in a little book with pictures. I just love it. It's like checking things off a list, right? It's very fulfilling, very you feel very good and accomplished. There's a lot to go, and so this dive site, and I could be wrong. I don't know because I've only played this one mode so far. It's not endless. There are boundaries, but it's quite a big area. It's actually a very, very big area. We did reach one boundary, but in about, gosh, half an hour's worth of play, we covered 7% of the area, swimming around and taking photos of fish.
Is
So
that of the total area, or
that's
are
just
there
of,
separate areas that you can
well,
go to?
I assume there are separate areas. This is just one dive site, and it says you
Okay.
can start a new dive site. So I'm guessing there are multiple. But that is a good question, and I'll find the answer to that. But I don't know specifically. Yeah, I think it's multiple, considering you can start a new dive site, unless it's a new dive site, unless it's a new dive in the same site. But that wouldn't
Yeah.
make sense because you've got an ID for it. I assume, well, it's probably randomly generated, but I guess I don't know if all 500 and whatever, 38, let's just say, creatures are in this one dive site. I had
Yeah.
assumed not. I assumed it was like portion of those were in this one dive site, and then you have to go to others. Or maybe you need to do the story mode to get some. I know there's a bunch of rare ones. So I don't think what do you call it? Like the kind of the ancient extinct ones. I don't know if they're swimming around in this one dive site with all the other normal creatures or current creatures. I don't know.
You have to go
Yeah,
back in time. You swim
yeah,
into a time
yeah.
portal and
I'd
end
like
up
to
in the
see the
crustacean period.
yeah, and I'd like to see the dive suit. Not that there were divers back then because humans didn't exist, but I'd love to see the dive suit look old as well, like one of those big circle helmets that they used to have. You know, I don't know, in the whenever 100 years ago, whenever they did it. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to the
Oh yeah,
sleek
like with the
ones.
big tube that connects to
Yeah,
them that floated up to the top.
yeah,
Yeah. Sure.
yeah. That would be cool. But so far, it's quite fun. I've seen lots of sharks, and what I love is one of my sons is quite into animals, so he's sitting next to me. He's like, "Oh, that's a tiger shark. Oh, that's a sunfish. Oh, that's a parrotfish." I'm like, "Wow, you know your fish. This is awesome."
Yeah. There's something
Yeah,
about little boys. Yeah, my son was the same when we would watch
yeah.
those the specials on to what's it called, Planet Earth, and he'd be
Oh,
like, yeah,
yeah.
naming off
Mhm.
all these fish. I'm like, I didn't even know you were interested in fish. How do you possibly know all these things?
It's funny. It's so funny. The sunfish one was good because he said, "Oh, yeah, they have sunfish in Minecraft." I'm like, "Okay." So that's where some of it comes from. Yeah, but so we saw a whale, we saw some sort of Japanese eel. There was this Australian ghost shark, which was really odd looking. There's a lot.
It
There's
sounds
some,
awesome though. The
yeah, yeah,
Australian ghost shark.
yeah, I know, right? They have some really cool names. There's butterfly fish. There's uh, groups, or what are they called? Groups. I don't know how to say that one.
Grouper.
Grouper, yeah, grouper. That's it. There's heaps, heaps and heaps and heaps. So it's really, really fun. And so far, like literally spent half an hour. So I haven't. This is not my full review because I've only had half an hour with it. But I'm looking forward to diving back in. I'm looking forward to playing more and exploring more and seeing how that plays out, especially the story mode. I'm kind of curious to see how that works. But I do love that you've got endless oxygen and you can interact with the fish. Like you don't get the sharks don't attack you. It's not like Dave the Diver. Very different experience where you're not stressing about air or being
Yeah.
attacked. It's just about exploration. There's also, I think it was 324 or something artifacts you can find. So on top of finding fish, you're also looking for these like shipwreck kind of things or just objects that have sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Like I don't know, vases or cups or whatever it is. Some sort of, it's not an ancient relic. It's just a relic of human shipwrecks, I suppose. So there's those to look for as well, which are cool. Yeah, you can have little buddies that float with you. Like you can have friends, like fish friends. So you find a fish that you like, and you can add him to your little, or add him or her, whatever, to your little list, and it will follow you around, which is really cute. My son also enjoyed that aspect. There's a lot to do so far, and I'm definitely looking forward to doing more. But that is out now. The only thing, you know, as a consumer, I have to weigh up whether it's, and so like I said, half an hour in, not really to make that distinction yet. But is it worth the high price? Because it's not a cheap game. It's a full priced game. I suppose it's a first party title, right? So, or at least it's published by Nintendo. I don't know if they actually developed it, but it's
Yeah, let
published
me
by
see. I'm on
Nintendo.
the page now. It does say published by Nintendo. It doesn't list the developer, of course.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if they developed it or just published it, but it is a first party published title, meaning it is full price. So it's not cheap. Whether that, if you're going to get, you know, 100 hours worth of gameplay out of it, then it's fine, or even 50 hours really. But I'll evaluate that and see how I go. Like I said, half an hour, I got 7% of this one dive site. So if you extrapolate that out, you're looking at hours just to get this one dive site complete. That's not to mention the story mode, and I guess this online experience. That's probably endless in terms of you can just go exploring with friends or other online swimmers, divers, for as long as you like. And I'm not sure what they do in those teams or squads. They just interact and search for. Maybe this is where these ancient kind of creatures come in. The special areas where you can go as a group, something like that. So yeah, I'll find out more about that one. But so far so good. Early
What
days. Yeah.
amuses me about the shared expeditions, I'm looking at it
Mm,
on Nintendo's site here. It
yeah.
says that you can invite up to 30 friends, or maybe it's 30
Okay.
total divers.
Ah, yeah.
Share your session ID. If the session has fewer than 30 people, you may also be
Mm.
joined by up to 10 random divers from around the world. So now
Okay.
I'm wondering who has 30 friends, all of whom are going to buy this game, and they're all
Mm,
going to hop online together to make sure that they know everybody who's in their diving game with them.
yeah.
Yeah, I've got maybe six friends on the Nintendo, and on any given game, a maximum of one other person owns that game. Well, unless it's Zelda, of course, then all of them do.
Yeah,
But
true. True.
yeah,
That's the
the games
exception.
I play, I'm not getting 30 of my friends to play that game with me.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And so only 10 randoms. That means you won't have a dive with 30 random players?
Yeah, it looks that way. If you have, I'm guessing it says joined by up to 10. So if you only have 10 people, then maybe there are 20 divers. So yeah, I wonder why they cap
Mm,
that at 10 random divers. It does say that
yeah,
they're not AI, it's 10 random divers from around the world. So they'll just pair
interesting.
you up, I guess, with other players.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure why they had to cap that. Like, yeah, what if you've only just got one friend?
Yeah.
Or if you have zero friends, does that mean you can be paired with 10 random people without any friends? Do you have to have a friend?
Well, it says shared expedition. So maybe if you're doing a shared session,
Hmm.
then this comes into play.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Maybe there's two options, one with friends, one with just randoms. Maybe they can do 30. Maybe they
Yeah.
capped the shared sessions. I'll check that out. I'll report back on that one during the week because I'm keen to see how this 30 session, 30 player session looks. I am interested. See what happens. Yeah. So I'll give it another go. But there is a bit of an underwater theme with my gaming this week because the other one that I'm playing is another Crab's Treasure, which you might remember. I think we heard about during, I think it wasn't the last indie showcase, although it might have been mentioned briefly, but I think the one before that it was highlighted. Was that back in February maybe?
Yeah.
So that was, yeah, another crab's treasure. It's about a little crab who loses his shell and he has to explore the ocean, beat, combat enemies, find trinkets, similar similar I guess to Endless Ocean. You're finding little relics and things, but in this case it's plastics. It's like rubbish. It's actually trash, I think they call it. And eventually get your shell back. So someone, it's actually a really uh, I don't know if cute's the right word, amusing introduction. So this little crab, his name, what's his name, Krill, Krill. His name's Krill. He is just living his best crab life, his hermit crab life, and suddenly this little creature. I don't know who the creature is. You don't see the creature. You see this little shark head, but it's not a shark, like a living shark. It's like one of those little, like almost like a puppet thing. It's like a stick with a shark on the end, and you can make the mouth open and close. So something's in the water holding this object and making the mouth close and open, talking in this plastic shark voice. So I don't know who's in control, but the shark voice, it's called the loan shark, says, "Hey, you, did you know this area now is under the control of the Duchess, which is this giant crab creature that lives in a castle somewhere? And now, for her protection, you have to pay tax, basically. So all the creatures living there have to pay tax. This little krill dude had no idea, has no money, of course. He's just a crab. And so they take his shell as collateral. So he has to go and find, well, not money, but plastic. This Duchess loves plastic and trash, like I said. So he's got to find enough trash to earn his shell back, essentially, to pay his taxes in trash. So it's an interesting premise. It's quite a cute or amusing little outlay. It's not as cute or kid friendly as I expected, though. It's actually a really hard game. They call it a Souls like experience,
Yeah, not the
which
kind of premise or setup I would expect in a Souls like, but
exactly, yes, exactly. So even from the trailer that I saw, unless I missed that, they probably did say Souls like, and I just glossed over that part. But I thought it was like a really cute little action adventure. No, it's really hard. It's really hard. It's really, really hard. Do you can you give a nice definition of Souls like? Are you able to do that? You're probably better at that than me.
well, my definition is stay away from it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, since I haven't played the game that the term Souls like came from, for
Mm.
my take on it is always just that it's the kind of game where you are not going to be able to get through it alive in your
Yeah.
first time. Part of it is to die, and you're going to learn from your
Yes.
experience and go back and then start again. So it's kind of a, I don't know the exact definition or the variation between a Souls like and a rogue like,
Yeah, that's a good
except that Souls like to
question.
me is even more difficult. So that's,
Hmm.
I could be wrong. Correct me. I'm willing to accept it if necessary.
I'm not super familiar with it either, but I do know that they are known for their very high levels of difficulty. I think Rogue like is more. They tend to be more random levels or changing levels? Is that right? Souls like is
Uh,
not necessarily that. Like levels are laid out for you, or at least the world is laid out for you. It's not randomized. It's just very hard. And there are various save points that you have to go back to, and you lose all your kind of earnings, I suppose, when you die, and you go back to that save point, and you have to restart from there. So you have your earnings from that save point, I guess. And in the case of another crab's shell, oh gosh, what's it called? Sorry, what's the name of it? Another crab's treasure. You collect these microplastics, and so when you die, you lose those, and you go back to the last. There's kind of these like big rainbowy shimmering shells that are like little safe houses where you can level up, and that's where you would restart essentially. Having said that, another crab's treasure does have a lot of accessibility options. Like it knows it's hard, and so it does give you a chance somewhat to kind of cope a bit better. And there's a lot of options you can switch on and off to kind of give yourself like less damage taken, or enemies have lower health. Or if none of that really works for you, you can give your crab a shell in the form of a handgun, which is interesting and violent. But essentially, he's this little hermit
like
crab
an
with this.
actual pistol? Is he firing bullets out of it, or is
Yep.
it shooting the bubbles or like little
Um,
colorful aquarium
it
stones or something?
looks like a handgun. It looks like a real gun, and it shoots what look like bullets, and it one shots your enemies. So it's a lot easier with the gun. But it also just it's a little jarring with the cute crab, you know, scenery. Suddenly you have this weapon. It's like a hand cannon, really. It's much bigger than the crab. But it's there. And to be honest, the kids found it very amusing and kind of loved it because, boys and guns, I don't know. It's just, they seem to love them. But yeah, it does make it a lot easier. I will say that. And at one point, there was a little mini boss that was repeatedly killing me. And so I had to switch the gun on, took him out, and moved on. So yeah, it's just so they are there. Those options are there to kind of make it a little bit easier for players. It's just, yeah, I'm not sure what I think yet about this one because, like I said, I was expecting something a lot cuter and easier. Yeah, but the story's fine. The story's kind of fun, and there's lots of NPCs to talk to. There's lots of enemies to beat. There's lots to collect. There's lots of little treasures and things to collect. It looks quite nice underwater. It's a bit more slightly more cartoony underwater environment than Endless Ocean, for example, which, Endless Ocean is more realistic looking. Um, yeah, there's some nice little music playing in the background. I need to delve further, yeah, delve or dive further into this one as well. But it is, yeah, it's not exactly what I expected. There are some performance issues, but the developers know about this. There's a patch coming apparently. So if you are a player, because this one came out, I think, about a week or so ago, if you're a player who's having issues, I think they are addressing those. One thing I did notice, and I don't know if they're addressing this specifically, but I did get stuck a couple of times. Like when these games comes out, it's just like Tears of the Kingdom, right? Exploration is kind of key. And
Yeah.
so I would go into all these nooks and crannies to see what's going on over there. And I got stuck a couple of times, like literally stuck, and I couldn't get out. And so I had to reset it, which is kind of annoying because I didn't die. I just couldn't get out. Like, I'm like, oh, that doesn't seem right. So it
Yeah, especially
doesn't.
in a game that makes it so easy to die when you're finally doing something right and have to restart for a totally different reason. I can see how that
Mm,
would put you off.
yeah, exactly. So yes, we'll see how that goes. Um, any questions for me about either of those two games before we move on to something you're playing?
Well, I guess we can move on.
Yeah. Okay. Give you a chance to talk for a
The
bit.
although this game, I don't know if it's one that I really am excited to talk about. Okay, I'm playing a game called Class of Heroes 2G Remaster Edition.
Hmm.
This is a remaster of a game that came out for the PSP back in 2010. It's the second in a series. The first game, called Class of Heroes, is also now available for the Switch, and you can get them in two different ways. You can buy the games individually, or you can get them in the Class of Heroes collection, which
Hmm.
again goes back how many games do we need to have before we can call it a collection? In this
Yeah,
case, it's
two
two.
two doesn't seem like a collection, does it? But that's
Yeah.
okay.
Bill Steidler with us is reviewing Class of Heroes Anniversary Edition, and I am reviewing Class of Heroes 2G. We're going to put them into one review because it's more of a conversation between the two of us than a review of this game.
Cool.
I don't even know where to start, and I say it because it was so hard to start.
Right.
Um, this is a dungeon crawler. I can equate it to games like Etrian Odyssey, where you're moving through these dungeons, kind of like block by block, and
Hmm.
as you're doing so, it's mapping it out. So you're mapping out these dungeons. You're fighting just a vast number of enemies in turn-based mode. You're putting together parties of people. In this case, the whole thing, as you can tell by the name Class of Heroes, it takes place in a school. Each game is in a different school. And you kind of put together your classmates and you go on assignments. You get assignments from your teacher to go into the labyrinths or dungeons to either pass the class or die, more or less.
Hmm.
So, not the kind of school I ever would have made it out of, I guess, alive. Um, but as Bill and I said, we think that the issue is that as the games were originally released for the PSP, that was back when everything was being released physically, and they came with a manual. There was no manual with the game.
Hmm.
We couldn't find digital manuals for the game, and it was such a confusing mess at the start of each of them for both of us. It was things like, okay, now in order to progress, you need to go create a character, but you don't have to create a character and you can progress without it. These are the kind
Hmm.
of instructions we were getting that just made no sense and were very circular. I went in on my game and created a character before it shows you who else you get in the party for the story, and found out the person I created was almost exactly the same as someone who was already in my party. So
Oh
I thought,
no.
well, what was the point? There are other things I could have done had they
Mm,
told me up front who was going to be in my party. I could have tried to round it out a little bit more. So I
mm.
just abandoned it and then didn't want to go through the character creation process again. So I went in without it. I got my first assignment. I went down into my first labyrinth and nothing was being mapped out. I was moving around, but I had no map. So I couldn't tell where I'd been, where I haven't been, if I would be able to get any clues as to how to get to this treasure chest that I'm seeing in the distance. Um, so I restarted again and I went back and found out they did at one point say, yeah, you can go to the school's store and buy stuff. But like all the things that they put in were really expensive. And normally when I see that in a JRPG or any game, the thought is, okay, I'm not supposed to have it yet. I got to work
Mm,
with what I have and go get this done.
mhm,
Towards
makes
the very
sense.
bottom of this massive list of products is a map. I had to buy my
Mhm.
first map and I could afford it at the start, but they had it buried so far down that without scrolling, I was never going to see it. So I have to buy a map to go down in order to activate the map.
Oh,
It
geez.
was that kind of frustration, but on top of it, although it looks nice and it's kind of well acted in parts, at
Mhm.
least mine. Um, the characters were, you know what, I'm so frustrated on the game that I lost my thought on where I was going. um
The characters? Are they good? Are they rounded out?
well, the characters are fine. They like there are a lot of tropes. Like there's this big guy who they're obviously making very effeminate, and his name is Big Fairy Man.
Right.
So we've got that kind of comedy
Mhm.
from going back to 2009, 2010,
Mhm.
when that's the sort of thing that happened. Um, but so it's just got so many things like that that are frustrating you as you go along, that it's a very hard game to get through. It's to the I did a search online, like it was so hard for me to get into the first dungeon and figure out the flow of the game that I went onto YouTube and watched someone else play it to
Mm,
see
mhm.
if that would give me a clue, and it helped. But I noticed as this person was playing it that the exact same frustrations, like bouncing around randomly from area to area, the same thing was happening.
Mhm.
And
Right.
then I found the actual manual on
Oh,
a digital version of the PSP manual, and I downloaded that, and that helped a little bit too. So I'm able to push through it, and now getting towards the point where to the completion point where I can write the review, so it'll go
well,
up.
that's cool.
The review's not going to be great.
Yeah.
Um, and in fact,
Still
since
sounding
Bill and
good.
I are going back on forth on this for our discussion, I'm actually being a little nicer to it than Bill did on the one he had.
Well, I
So
mean,
it's
you'd hope
go
the
ahead.
second one is a little bit better, right? Like, you're playing the
Yeah,
second. Yeah.
yeah. Their difference is the first one featured randomly generated labyrinths,
Mm,
so
mhm,
roguelike. Um, the one that I'm playing, the dungeons are not randomly generated; they're all set.
mhm,
So there's a little more. There's kind of a better flow to it. It pushes along with the story a little bit better. You feel like you're making more progress than you do in a roguelike, where every time you go
mhm.
in, it's completely different.
Yeah.
And
Mhm,
those are fine. It's set up kind of like Sharon the Wanderer, where you each time you go in, it's completely different, and that's part of the experience. So those kind of games can work, and I like it.
mm,
But I think for a game like this, it's a little more forgiving. If each time you go in, if you have to retreat to go back, it's a little more fair to be able to pick up where you left off. So there are differences between the two. The second one, yeah, looks a little bit better, but even the original release, I think the Japanese release of the first one was 2008, and the Japanese release of the second one for the PSP was 2009. So there's not a huge gap where they were spending, getting new technology to make
mm,
them a lot better. Um, I guess if I was going to warn people about it, if you're going to try it, if you're really into these kind of games, then don't buy them both in the first shot. Buy
mhm.
one, see if it frustrates you too much, and if it does, you're not going to like the other. And I imagine you can
Yeah,
go back and forth between the two.
true.
But without any sort of like hand holding, and I'm going to call it that, we needed hand holding to get us started. The opening segment of these games were just so frustrating that it was really hard to enjoy anything beyond that.
Yeah, it's a shame that they didn't know. Like, you'd think they would have received that feedback back in the day,
Yeah.
or from even from test players for this new version. Why would they not fix that?
Yeah.
Maybe they, yeah. Mm.
Because there's so much to worry about in games like this too. Like they're pretty difficult, and having to even figure out how to get a map or
Mm.
where you're supposed to go, what labyrinth is doing, what assignment, how to get your assignments. I mean, everything was just such a hurdle to
Yeah.
go through. And I imagine someone out there is like, well, you just got to do this, 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 and this. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but I've been playing games a very long time. I know how these
Hmm.
systems work, and if
Yeah,
it's confusing me that much, then there's something broken in the way this was initially set up.
definitely.
But
Yeah.
that which leads me to my next game, because I like games like this. Now I've never played Etrian Odyssey,
Hmm.
and now I think I'm going to. You may find me talking about that again when we start talking about our Switch Twilight games. I may add that as a
Cool.
new game to play. But another game that's close to this is that it's a couple games. In fact, I'm entering my age verification now in the Nintendo, so I
Yeah.
can pull up the information to talk about Labyrinth of Refrain, Coven of Dusk. I reviewed this game back in 2018 for Pure Nintendo. It was released by NIS America.
Hmm.
And it's that kind of game. It's developed by the same company that released like the Dissidia. I'm not
Oh,
sure how to
yeah.
pronounce that. Yeah, those kind of games. So it's got that look about it, but it's very much you need to go down into these labyrinths and explore. It was the first time I'd ever played a game like this. Within like the modern times, and I say that because I go all the way back to the Intellivision in the mid '80s,
Yeah.
and there was a Dungeons and Dragons game called I think it was the Treasures of Minotaur.
Hmm.
But it was the first time I played like a first person point of view game, and you moved block by block through these dungeons, and you kept going lower and lower, and you would open doors, and there would be a monster there, and you'd fight it in a turn based combat. And it's the first game I ever played that was like that, for even first person point of view. But it led up to a game like this, and I gave it a 7.5, maybe an 8.5 at the time. But then I played the next game that came after it from the same developers, and that was Labyrinth of Galeria. And I enjoyed that one even more. So I thought, you know what? Now I'm going to go back to Coven of Dusk, because that was the first time I'd played one of these in such a long time. I wanted to
Mm.
see if the developer, by the way, is Nippon Ichi. I think I
Oh,
forgot
yeah.
to mention that before. Nippon
Hmm.
Ichi Software. Um, which does that translate to Japan One Software?
It sounds,
That,
yeah, I would think so. Yes.
yeah, Japan One. Okay. Um, but so I wanted to go back to the first one. Having it was like with Fire Emblem. The first time I started to play a Fire Emblem game, I didn't like it that much, and I kind of bailed after about 10 hours on it. But then I played the game that came after it, and I liked it a lot more. So I stopped and said I just missed the point, and I went back to see if I
Mm.
enjoyed the first one more, and I did, and I am.
Mm.
I'm loving it. And it's just as complicated as Classic Heroes. It's got just as much going on, but it does such a better job at guiding you from the start to like point you in this direction and over here. It's still hard at the start, and there's still a lot of ambiguity, but you don't feel completely overwhelmed and insulted by your lack of ability to do even the most basic things.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, so I've been playing this game quite a bit too now, Labyrinth of Refrain, Coven of Dusk, and I wanted to mention it today, even though it's not a review game, because while I'm talking about it, it's on sale um,
Cool.
quite a bit. It's normally a $50 game, and it's currently
Hmm.
$20 in the eShop.
Wow.
But the sale ends May 6th. So that's going to take us up probably right up to when this posts. Yeah, I assume you'll be up
Mm.
on the 6th.
On
Is it
Monday,
too
yeah.
late? Will this be up Monday?
It should be, yeah. So
Okay.
if listeners are, especially on your side of things in the US, it'll be early Monday, so you'll have all day if you listen to it first
Yeah.
thing. If you're in Australia, it'll be later in the day, but that's okay. Yep.
Yeah. So I do very much recommend this game. I'm going to recommend you get this instead of Class of Heroes, um,
Hmm.
with apologies to P Cube,
Mm.
and with the caveat that it is rated M. It has some
Mm.
sexual themes. It's got some strong language, and parts of it are kind of it's. I think in the review I may have referred to it as an adult fairy tale. It's got fairy
Hmm.
tale elements, but with really dark themes throughout the whole thing. So and again, kind of portrayed in a lighthearted way. It's not this big somber thing that's going to keep you up at night. But it does take on some heavy subjects in kind of a breezier way than some people are probably willing to deal with these days. So keep that
Yeah.
in mind. But what a great game it is, and I hope that having since they released that in 2018 and Labyrinth of Galeria was just a couple years ago, I'd really love it if Nippon Ichi is able to give us another game in this series.
Yeah, I was about to ask if there are others apart from those two. Are they just those two in the series?
I believe that's it. Yeah, in the
Yeah.
Labyrinth of series.
Looks like there's some DLC for the Refrain one at least. And also, just FYI, in Australia, it's R-rated. Our classification
Okay.
system is different, but it is R-rated, which means you need to be 18 to play it in Australia. There is a free demo, at least in Australia as well. So possibly or probably in the US also there's a free demo, which you could
Yes.
give a go. But $20, I mean, that's actually sounds pretty decent for this.
Yeah.
It actually does look really nice from the
Yeah,
screenshots on Nintendo's
the
website.
graphics are good. Oh, you know what? Maybe that's what I was going to say when I got choked up earlier on talking about the characters
Mm.
from Class of Heroes. Is that the audio as you're exploring is bad? Um,
Oh, okay.
like they bring in sound effects every now and again, but they sort of just come out of nowhere. Like you're hearing
Mhm.
nothing, and then all of a sudden there's this sound, and you turn around and you have no clue what made it. It's so the audio is very disconnected from the experience, um, and the graphics are fine in the remaster, but they're not great.
Mm.
I find the design and the overall style of the Labyrinth of Refrain game and Labyrinth of Galeria just much more better and cohesive, and it's just an overall better experience.
Yeah. Is Labyrinth of Refrain and its sequel or prequel, whichever, those two games, were they ported to the Switch or were they made for the Switch? I mean, they might have released on other consoles at the same time, but they're not like
Y-
2000 X, like 2010 or whatever games that have come out again in 2018. They were like made around that time. Is that right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I
They
think
were
that
new for the
shows.
system.
It sounds as though, without being too critical and having not played these games, but it sounds a little bit like just jumping onto the Switch bandwagon for the class of heroes. Like, hey, we've got these games from 10 or 12 or 14 years ago, whatever. Let's put them on the Switch. It's a super
Yeah,
popular system rather than make a decent sequel that actually fixes some of those kind of
yeah.
issues. Like maybe
And
they
I'm
should have just,
normally all
yeah.
for that. There's just they needed to do more with it than just grab it
Mm,
and put it on,
yeah.
and they didn't, and that's what frustrates
The map at the bottom of the list gets me. That's just,
me.
I just, why would you
Yeah,
do that? Or just give you a map, maybe, or at least make it obvious at the top of the list that you can afford this map and you need it to go forward. Just,
yeah, and like I
uh,
didn't expect the whole map to be open to me right away. Part of this
yeah.
game, the fun in these games is mapping it out as you go along, but you have to
Mm,
buy like a physical map in order to be able to do it.
yeah. Which is fine. That's what The Legend of Zelda does. Even the very first game, you need a map. You find that in the dungeon. Every dungeon has a map, and then you find
Yeah,
the compass, which is fine.
yes, the compass. Yep.
Yeah, but at least you know that that's the deal. Whereas, yeah, you're going in blind really to this one. Anyway, interesting. That's thank you. Because yeah, normally your games are very positive. So it's,
Yeah,
I'm not
and
I'm
honestly,
very
I like
happy.
talking about the games that before we did the podcast, or at least before I was on it. There are a lot of great games that I never talked about in this. I
Mm,
was kind of prompted by Class of Heroes to dig back into this and discuss it. So we'll
yeah.
call that Class of Heroes victory. Is that
Yeah.
even though it's not a good game, it's a type of game that I really like and like to talk about. So
Mm.
it's prompted this other discussion. But and there aren't a lot of games like this. I wish they would make more.
Yeah, it sounds cool. I probably should check out Labyrinth of Refrain.
Hmm.
In terms of, I guess, listeners, if you're a Class of Heroes fan or if you've had similar issues, let us know. Or if you're also a fan of Labyrinth of Refrain, let us know about that as well. We'd love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, and by all
Yep.
means, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Help me understand because I'm willing to accept direction to be able to dig into these games. I'd rather play new games than replay old ones,
Mm,
unless the old ones are just that much better.
yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Well,
Hmm.
there's only one other game that I wanted to talk about, which is another review game for me. And I finished, well, have I finished it? I played through it. Let's just say that. It's called Anglerfish, which seems like, and we were talking about this before the show, it seems like a continuation of my underwater theme of Endless Ocean and Another Crab's Treasure. It's not, though. It's not. It's a horror game set completely on land. The anglerfish of the title is like a lure, it's sort of a trap for humans. And I was thinking about this before the show. It's a little bit like, have you seen From Dusk Till Dawn, the movie with George Clooney and like Quentin
Uh,
Tarantino? It's not a Tarantino movie, but it feels like a Tarantino movie, and he actually stars in this movie.
I did
It's
not. I know of it. I remember all the trailers and the whole thing, but I did not actually
right.
see it.
Well, it's about some sort of bar in Mexico where these bandits run to. George Clooney and his friends. They're bandits. I think they robbed a bank or they did something, and they're on the run. And they go to this bar in Mexico to kind of hole up for the night. And it's all about that for the first half of the movie, and then suddenly it turns into a vampire movie. Or the bar shuts, you can't escape, and all of the pretty women inside the bar are actually vampires. So that's the short version. Anglerfish is the same, similar premise. You play the role of a man who's on his no, not his. He's a friend of a bachelor, a groom to be on his bachelor party night. They're all dressed as Japanese schoolgirls for some reason, and they enter this bar or club or whatever you want to call it, and it's called Anglerfish. And the doors are locked. And at midnight, vampires or these weird kind of creatures come out and attack everyone and kill them all. So your job as this person, this friend, I don't think you have a name. I can't remember if you have a name or not. It's not important. It's not important. You have to survive and escape the anglerfish place, hotel, whatever. I don't know what it is. What would you call it? Bar? What do you call it in America if you were at a
Yeah,
venue?
bar, tavern.
Bar? Tavern? Yeah, something like that. Anyway, so it's a horror game. It's kind of it's weird. It's a weird game. It's very weird. It's good though. I would say it's quite clever and different. This is not like any other game I've ever played, honestly. I don't know if I would have played it if I was not reviewing it. And I definitely don't know if I would have continued playing it if I was not reviewing it. Because initially I was just like, what on earth is this? I just don't. This is not something I want to play. But playing a few times, I kind of got hooked into it. And that's not to say it's not a good game. It is actually, like I said, it's very creative. It's just, it didn't seem like it was for me at first because of the weirdness of it. But yeah, like I said, it's very creative. I think the devs have done a pretty good job of creating something pretty unique. The premise, apart from the setup that I just said, is that you die repeatedly. You go in to the bar. Every time you die, you're back out the front of the tavern. You have to go back in. You get locked in. You pick up your shotgun and you try to make it to the end. And then you die and you do it all again. It sounds very repetitive. And at one point, it started to feel repetitive. But thankfully, there are a few cool things that help mitigate that. For example, you let's say you pick up your gun, you go through the first room, you go to the second room, you know where the bad guys are by now because it's not procedurally generated, it's all kind of laid out for you. And like Class of Heroes 2, I suppose. But then there are shortcuts. So once you've gone through this one, so the second room, for example, there's this awful area that I hated where these spikes pop out of the floor and impale you, and it's awful, and I hated it. But then once you open another door, you can skip that bit. You just go through this door that's a lot closer, and you kind of miss that whole part. So there's little shortcuts you kind of open up, and they stay open for you as even though you've died. The game opens by saying it says this in the titles, like in the introduction. This game saves when you die. You can't save it while you're playing it. You only save when you die. So when you die, it does have this little save icon, and it means kind of what you've done is kept fresh. You do have to go back to the beginning, but at least you can take these shortcuts. At least you know where things are and you know what to expect, that kind of thing. So it does get a little bit easier as you replay. Um, replay. I don't know why I said it funny. Anyway, as you replay,
Replay. We'll use
replay.
that from now on. I like
Yeah.
it. Replay.
As you replay. Um, the weirdness is like where you get your gun, for example, you go into this room right at the beginning and the gun's waiting for you once you've unlocked it. There's a bartender who offers you a drink, and for no reason, you don't have to drink these drinks, but for some reason they're there, and they do things like make the skeletons smile at you when they see you, or make your head disappear, so you're just running around without a head for no reason, or it kills you instantly. Like you could literally go into this game every time you die, you go back in, drink this drink, and die again, and it's like what? What? What is the point of that? I mean, I did that the first time because I didn't know what the drink did, but after that, you know what it does, and so you don't tend to do that again. One makes your controls backwards, so left is right and right is left, which is really annoying.
Jeez. Yeah. Some pretty
Um,
powerful drinks they're mixing there.
yeah, exactly. But it's kind of like you get to a point and then something happens and there's lots of jump scares. These weird skeleton creatures just leap out at you from nowhere and you're like, and you die. Or you shoot them if you're quick enough. And sometimes I was quick enough and sometimes I wasn't. It's pretty scary. It's pretty creepy. There's lots of blood and gore. There's the one section that's like a maze, and you like only have a spotlight on you, so you can't really see the whole screen at this point. And the character's face looks terrified. Like his mouth is like in this downward frown and it's open and it's quivering. And I thought that was kind of cool. The rooms do change a little bit, as in like you'll go through and sometimes there's just skeletons sleeping there for some reason. Sometimes there's statues that weren't there before. As you get closer to the end, these little skeletons appear and they're holding up signs. They're not attacking you. They're just saying, you're close, like go for it. You're the man kind of thing, right? It's a little bit dynamic like that. It's a very interesting, it's a very interesting game. Really, really interesting. And I made it through to the end eventually. I persisted. I actually wanted to get to the end because I got so close and I kept dying. But because these shortcuts make it really uh, like slightly easier to get to the end again, a run is only about 5 minutes, maybe. So it's pretty easy to continue and continue and continue. At one point, I was, and this is another weird thing. There's a dog at the front of this tavern that asks you questions every time you die, weird random questions. And at one point, the dog said, "Do you know how many times you've died?" And I said, "No." And it put on the door 36. And I'm like, "Okay, I've died 36 times." And that was before I finished it. So I would have died at least 50 by the time I finished it. So that's how many times I played it. And there's this room where I thought I had reached the end, but it's actually just a room with all these vampire statues who don't attack you. And on the wall, there's all these pictures, and it looks like these are all the endings you can get. And they're kind of like shadows because you haven't got them yet. So there's ending one, ending two, ending three. Then there's a secret ending, and then there's three other random words I can't remember. So I think there's like seven or nine. I can't remember. There's a bunch of different endings. So you can replay this and do it again. And even when I thought I'd finished it, it made me do it again anyway. It's like, oh, you thought that was the end? No, go and do it again. I'm like, oh, okay. So I did it again.
Wait a minute.
Um, yeah. But I finally got to a point where I did see credits and it did say, you've done ending one or whatever it was called. I'm like, yay. I got through one ending. And then it said, do you want to know the truth? And it made me kind of do parts of it again in a different weird way, and then you see what the story behind this tavern is. And I won't say what that is because it's a spoiler, but you kind of get the gist. There's vampires and they're doing things. Anyway, it's a really weird, interesting game. Not played anything like it before. I think I don't want to say, horror games tend to feature more prevalently around Halloween. This would have been an awesome Halloween game, honestly. And when it comes to Halloween, when we do our Halloween podcast, I will mention it again and I'll say, hey, go play Anglerfish if you want something weird and scary, because it is both of those things. So, yeah, I have to write up my review yet. But now that I've at least completed it once, I think I can do that. So, watch my review coming this week. I think the game came out about a month or so ago. So it's already out on the eShop. I don't know the price or anything like that. I can't imagine it's super expensive, but it's something certainly if you're after something completely different and you do like your horror games, then oh there you go. It's 14.99. Is that Australia or America? I don't know, but it's about $15. Might be 10 in
It's
America.
$10,
Yeah,
in the US.
cool. Which I think is a pretty good price
Yeah.
considering I would have spent how many hours would I spend? At least 5 to get the one ending. So if you want to do all of them, and I imagine it'd be slightly easier the other endings. I don't know if it's the same. I will give at least one. I will at least try another game to see if it has changed or if it's the same premise, like the same outlook. Sorry, outlay, like as if the levels have changed at all. There's these little break rooms, for example, in terms of the weirdness. There's these little break rooms. They're called break rooms, and you go in the door, and it's just like bathroom and you can have a bath and then you leave. There's one where you can fish randomly.
I
It's,
was going to ask
yeah,
about that because that's one of the graphics they have up in the eShop is why this fellow with the mask is standing outside an outhouse fishing.
yeah, yeah. That's a break room.
Okay.
It's just so
So they
bizarre.
like nothing happens there. He can just fish, and then when you're done, you go back into the game. He doesn't get attacked by some
Well,
some
kind
lake
of
monster.
most of the time. Most of the
Okay.
time. I don't want to spoil it, but in that scene that you're seeing, the autumn leaves, that is just a fishing sim where you don't even catch a fish. It just jiggles, and I didn't see how you could catch a fish. And
You
then
can't even.
then
That's
you leave.
scary
But
enough in its own right. Just
yeah,
tossing your lure into the water and
yeah. I will
nothing.
say the rooms. There are alternate versions of those rooms at one point in the game without giving anything away. But as you're at least working your way to the end, those are just breadcrumbs. Nothing bad happens. But yes, there is a change that happens. You'll know because the room looks a bit different, and you'll see it. It's a
Okay.
pretty, yeah. It's kind of like, I don't want to give too much away, but when I did make it to the end, the boss fight was not a typical boss fight, and escaping was fun and kind of stressful. It was just a lot. It was a lot. Yeah, definitely, yeah, it's definitely different. I feel like I don't know the developer's name, but they give credit to two people, so I feel like it's a dev team, a quite a small dev team.
Cool.
Um, something villains they're called something like, oh yeah, I should look that up. Anyway, it's really it's the standout game. I would say. Let's just put it that way. I don't know what I'm going to score it because it's so bizarre, but yeah, certainly
I have
fun.
to ask one more question too, because in the description in the eShop it
Hmm.
says your secluded bar. Well, the grammar's not good. Your
Yeah.
secluded bar in Mole's Mountains. Here you will experience the true survival horror of dating, which means you will die. Is there a dating theme?
Well, not kind of. I suppose at the start, when you're in this bachelor party scene, you know, before they go in, these bachelor friends, whatever, they're talking. The groom's sort of saying, "Hey, it's party time, whatever," and I think their goal is to get as many phone numbers as possible. But I don't know how that plays out. I found one phone number, and I don't know what to do with it. But
Okay.
and then I forgot all about it because I was right at the beginning, and then I didn't see any other numbers. There are little gnomes you can collect for some reason as well. So there's something there.
All
Um,
right.
yeah, there's two rooms I haven't been in, which probably might be part of some other ending, which had codes to get in, and I couldn't work out what the codes were because there were no clues. But as I was trying to escape at the very end, I saw a couple of clues that would lead to opening one of those doors. But for example, most of the game, I probably should have said this at the start, what type of game it is. It's mostly like a side scroller, and you don't jump or anything. You just have this gun and you just shoot. You have endless ammo, but only one life, one hit. But sometimes you'll be doing a top down kind of view, like an isometric kind of top down style. Sometimes you'll be doing a side scroller. These enemies will come out of nowhere. They one shot you as well. Like you die instantly as soon as they touch you. So yeah, it's pretty the death is imminent and frequent, to put it bluntly. Yeah, it's interesting. It is definitely interesting. Stands out as a very unique idea. So I will say that. Anyway,
Okay. Cool.
yeah.
Maybe I'll
Um,
try it come Halloween.
yeah, maybe you could do worse. It's definitely, and like we've talked about horror games at night. I was playing this during the day at first, and it was fine. I played it last night. It was much creepier, and I
Yeah.
had to sit. I found I had to sit closer to the TV, almost like I don't know if it's like this with horror movies. You know what it reminded me? Did it remind me of The Ring a little bit? It reminded me a little bit of The Ring, not the premise at all, but the video that they watch in The Ring, which is really weird.
Yes.
It has that quality. It's not as weird as the Ring video, but
Okay.
it's it has a little bit of that vibe to it, I would say. Yeah. Like you're watching a weird Ring video, but not quite that weird. But yeah. Hopefully I don't
Okay.
die in 7 days. Oh gosh, I shouldn't have said that. So let's just talk about Switch 2 rumors of the week before we close off the show. And this one I heard just yesterday was that there's a suggestion that the handheld version of the Switch 2, assuming it is a hybrid, will trade power for battery performance when docked. The quote was it would be clocked crazy low in undocked mode. So in handheld mode, it would, I think, and again, this is rumors, grain of salt. Nintendo's not announced anything. We're just speculating because it's fun. Um, the rumor was that people complained about the battery life of the Switch. in handheld, right? It doesn't really last a very long time, does it? Like when you're on a road trip, you're lucky to make kind of 3 or 4 hours using your Switch nonstop or on a plane trip or whatever. So this is saying, well, the Switch 2 is going to be super powerful, but they're going to kind of clock that, you know, power so that you've got more battery life at the expense of, I guess, graphics and performance. I don't know if that's true. It sounds a bit hard to make switch to games that are like HD, but then how will they perform if they're not using the full power of the Switch? I don't know. What do you think about that? Unless they've got a clever way of optimizing it in handheld, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to see what they mean by crazy low,
Yeah.
what the
Yeah.
hours are. I will say
Mm.
that if we're going to trade off battery life for more power, for better visuals, I support
Hmm.
that decision
Hmm.
because I mostly play in docked mode.
Yeah.
And although there's certainly times when you don't have access to it, pretty much everywhere you go now has outlets. So even if you're on a trip, there's still ways in your car when you're in the back seat that you'd be able to plug it in and be getting power as you're playing in handheld mode, um,
True.
or external batteries if you have to. That I'd rather the issues with it be something that's solved outside of the machine than inside the machine where we can't do anything about it.
Mm. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I would be okay with that. But again, if they if by crazy low they mean 45 minutes, then I'm like, all right, well, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
I got to at least be able to get across town with the thing. But so we'll see. And it's also something that would probably be addressed again, not for early adopters, which you and I would certainly be, but
Hmm.
a second generation, a third generation one would probably improve the battery life as it goes along. So,
Yeah, true. Is your
if they're
OLED
willing to wait.
one better?
I don't know because I can't think of a single time when I've had it in handheld mode where I worried about the power shutting off.
Right. Well, there you go.
Like I said, I'm mostly docked. I
Mm.
think it would be a bigger issue, like say I have a Switch Lite, and oftentimes I won't use that for a long period of time, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to play a game on the Lite because someone's using the other system, and the battery's dead because I haven't played it in 2 weeks. So
Right.
that's a bigger issue for me than having the battery go out while I'm playing.
Mm. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. Yeah, I don't really have an issue either. I think we go on long road trips occasionally and it doesn't last. We might drive for 10 hours or 9 to 10 hours and it doesn't last the whole trip, but we just deal with it. The kids have other things to do.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah,
that's part of the fun, right? Like, well,
yeah,
that's the gaming gods have told you you've been at it enough. Look
yeah,
out the window and check out the scenery now.
exactly,
Read a
exactly.
book.
Yeah, that's it. Yes. So you don't want infinite power, otherwise you'll be glued to the screen forever. So
Yep.
yeah. But yeah, I tend to play more in docked mode as well. So I'm similar to you. I think, if there was an easy way that didn't compromise too much on the quality and still maintained a good, they just need to have a good setup, a good internal setup that has a good battery. I don't know, phones don't last very long. They only last like 24 hours, maybe 2 days if you're lucky with a good phone that you don't use very much. But the Switch can't last 10 hours. So but it's video content on phones does drain the battery, so it's the same with the Switch.
Yeah.
It's graphically powerful stuff that we're churning through here, so take it does chew up the battery. So don't know,
Yeah. And
I'm
it's
sure
got a
to.
bigger screen too. So not
Yes,
only
much
is
bigger. Mm.
what's going on is more powerful in the background, but it's also doing it on a larger scale.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we'll see. I'm sure Nintendo's thought of all this and they're looking into the best way possible. That's, they don't want to compromise cost for quality as well. They're probably looking at something that's the most cost effective, that gets the most bang for buck, and delivers the best experience, handheld and docked. I'm sure they're balancing all of that stuff up as we speak, and hopefully we'll find out in June, which is only a month away. So that would be exciting. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the Switch Hero of the week. And I guess that brings us to the end of the show. Was there anything else you wanted to point out or highlight before we close things off?
Nope. I just next week I hope to have games that will bring me more joy than the one I played
Yeah, yeah, me
this week.
too.
My review for that, my and Bill's review will be up early in the week. So if you're curious to read more about it or hear what Bill had to say,
Yeah,
visit purenintendo.com.
Yeah.
it'll entertain.
Yeah, I'm definitely keen to hear that and see the final scores of those two. Thank you, Kirk. Thanks for joining me this week. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. And we hope you enjoyed the show. Let us know your thoughts. If you'd like to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter/X, Mastodon, and Blue Sky. We'd love to know what you think of the show. And we're putting together our next edition of the Pure Nintendo magazine. So if you want to jump on board and support us there, head on over to patreon.com/Pure Nintendo. Until next week, though, thank you and game on, everybody. Bye.